Section 5.2, Solving Inequalities by Multiplication and Division. Essential question. What causes the symbol to flip when dividing an inequality? Alright, so what do we have to remember about dividing when solving an inequality? So if you divide by a negative number, you must flip your inequality symbol around. And I'm going to show you an example of why this is true, but this is super important. If you divide both sides by a negative number, you have to flip your inequality symbol around. So I'm going to give you a really basic inequality. 8 is greater than 4. And I'm going to write that same inequality twice. So I'm going to pick a number. Let's say we want to divide this inequality by 2 because we're going to divide here. So let's say I want to divide these both by 2. Again, I'm just making up an inequality, making up a number to divide by. So 8 divided by 2 is 4. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So is 4 greater than 2? Yes. So this inequality stayed true when I divided both sides by a 2. Now let's see what happens if I decide to divide both sides by a negative number. So negative 2. Well, 8 divided by negative 2 is negative 4. 4 divided by negative 2 is negative 2. Is 4 divided by, or negative 4 greater than negative 2? No, it's not. Negative 4 is less than negative 2. So in order for this inequality to remain true, we would have to flip our inequality sign. So that's why if you divide by a negative number, you have to flip your inequality symbol around. Otherwise, your answer will no longer be true. All right, let's try it with some real examples here. So, our first one, solve and graph, 5x is greater than negative 20. So, 5x is greater than negative 20. So in order to get x by itself, I'm going to divide both sides by 5. Now I need to think about what kind of 5 I'm dividing by. I'm dividing by a positive 5, so I don't need to flip. Negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. So on this one, I don't flip it because 5 is positive. Now I can go ahead and graph this. So if you have a negative 4, you need an open circle because it's greater than. Remember, greater than and less than is an open circle. Greater than or equal to, less than or equal to is a closed circle. Then since my variable's on the left, I can use my graphing trick of turning this into an arrow. My arrow is pointing to the right, so I will shade to the right. And if you think about it, what numbers are greater than negative 4? Well, numbers that are bigger than negative 4, so all numbers to the right. All right, second one, 16 is less than 4x. So once again, I'll draw my train tracks. I need to get x alone, so divide both sides by 4. I'm dividing by a positive, so I don't need to flip anything. So here is my answer, but I need to rewrite this because we don't have the x on the left. And if I'm graphing, I always want the x to be on the left. So I'm going to rewrite it so the x is on the left, the 4 is on the right. Now if you're not sure what way to put your inequality symbol for rewriting, the mouth is opening to the x, so make sure your mouth opens to the x. So we need an open circle on 4, and our arrow is pointing to the right, so shade to the right. The graphing trick of the direction of the arrow only works if your variable is on the left, so be careful about that. All right, so negative 7x is greater than negative 49. All right, so now we need to divide both sides by a negative 7. Since I'm dividing both sides by a negative 7, I have to flip. write that on every problem where I end up flipping. I'm going to write flip off to the right-hand side so I remember I did that. A negative 49 divided by a negative 7, a negative divided by a negative makes a positive, and I now have x is less than 7. So I started out with a greater than symbol, but since I had to flip it because I divided by a negative, I now have a less than symbol. So I'm going to put an open circle on 7, and my arrow is pointing to the left, so I can shade to the left. Remember, my x was on the left-hand side, which is where I wanted it to be. All right, negative 8x is greater than 64. Divide both sides by negative 8. So since we're dividing by a negative, we have to flip (64) divided by negative 8 is negative 8. Variables on the left, so it is ready to graph. So open circle on negative 8, arrows pointing to the left, so shade to the left. All right, negative 25 is greater than or equal to 5x. To get x alone, divide both sides by 5. Now, you guys, it doesn't matter that the 25 is negative. You're not dividing both sides by 25. We're dividing both sides by the 5 to get x alone. So we don't have to flip on this one. Only if the 5 were negative would we need to flip. We do have our x on the right-hand side, though, so we want to rewrite this. So the x is on the left, the negative 5 is on the right, and my mouth is opening to the negative 5, so make your mouth open to the negative 5. So close circle on negative 5, and my arrow's pointing to the left, so shade to the left. Negative 3x is less than 75. Divide both sides by negative 3. Since I'm dividing by a negative, I have to flip. Negative, or 75 divided by negative 3 is negative 25. This is ready to graph because my arrow is on, or my variable is on the left. Since this is such a big number, we don't have the numbers in there for you already. But if you're ever making your own number lines, I say you don't need to have all the numbers. Just put the number you need in the middle, and then one bigger on the right, one smaller on the left. Arrow is going to the right, so I will shade to the right. All right. Negative 12 is greater than or equal to negative 3x. Divide both sides by negative 3. Since I'm dividing by a negative, I have to flip. Negative 12 divided by negative 3 is positive 4. But I also need to rewrite this one. So I'm going to put the x on the left, the 4 on the right. I'm going to write over here that I'm rewriting. So keep in mind, rewriting and flipping are not the same. Flipping means you're flipping it around immediately because you divided by a negative. Rewriting is just what you do at the very end to get your x on the left-hand side. So mouth is opening up to the x, mouth opens up to the x. So you'll see you actually end up with the same inequality you started with when you do both flipping and rewriting, but still go through that process. So close circle on 4, arrows pointing to the right, so shade to the right. Numbers that are greater than or equal to 4. Negative 50 is less than 5x. Divide both sides by 5. We divided by a positive, so we didn't have to flip, but I do want to rewrite. So I'm going to make that x, and then negative 10, and the mouth is opening to the x. And then I need a open circle on negative 10, shaded to the right. Summary.